Hi everyone, my name is Alia. On Christmas Eve, my life changed in the most unexpected way. My parents opened the large front doors of our Hillsborough home and placed my single suitcase outside on the cold marble steps. Behind them stood my younger sister, Viva, with her arms folded and a satisfied smile on her face. She looked at me and said, "Let's see how you manage on your own now." With no money, no car, and nowhere to go, I pulled my suitcase through the thick winter fog. The only thing protecting me from the cold was my long cashmere coat. Exhausted and shaking, I sat down on a park bench near our gated neighborhood, trying to catch my breath. That's when I noticed an elderly woman nearby. She was standing alone in the cold, clearly struggling to stay warm. Her hair was blowing in the wind and she looked weak and tired. Without thinking twice, I stood up, took off my coat, and gently placed it around her shoulders. She held my hands, looked straight at me, and softly said, "True kindness like this is very rare." Then she slowly walked away and disappeared into the fog. Exactly 1 hour later, everything changed again. 19 black luxury SUVs arrived quietly and stopped along the street. The same woman stepped out of the center vehicle. It was clearly her. But now she looked completely different. She was wearing an elegant long coat, her hair neatly styled and diamonds shining on her wrist. She walked directly toward me, smiled, and said just one sentence. "I've been watching you long enough to know exactly who you are." Who you really are. If you've ever been pushed aside by the very people who were supposed to protect you, type your city or state in the comments. I just want to know I'm not alone. And trust me, don't stop listening. What happened next completely changed everything. Earlier that same day, I was still trying to process the email I received at exactly 10 a.m. It was a termination notice from the San Francisco advertising firm where I had worked for 6 years. Another company, restructuring. Just like that, my job was gone. I packed up my small desk plant, placed it on the passenger seat of my 12-year-old Honda Civic, and started driving south toward Hillsborough. Normally, it was a 47-minute drive, about 32 miles, but traffic had other plans. While sitting in the parking garage, I called my mom. "I just need to stay for a couple of weeks while I figure things out," I said. She sounded rushed and distracted. All she said was, "Dinner is at 7, and then ended the call. When I finally walked through the front doors, I barely recognized the house. It looked more like a luxury magazine spread than the home I grew up in. A massive Christmas tree filled the 2-story entrance. White orchids were placed everywhere. Staff in formal uniforms were setting a long dining table for nearly 20 guests. My father, Langston, was casually opening an expensive bottle of champagne like it was any ordinary evening. My mother, Oilia, was adjusting a new pearl necklace that definitely hadn't been there last month. And then there was my younger sister, Vivica. She was spinning around in a red silk dress, showing off a large diamond ring on her left hand, acting like this was the moment she had always dreamed of. Standing beside her was the last person I expected to see. Darius, my ex of 4 years. His arm was wrapped tightly around her waist. My hands froze. I quietly dropped my keys into the bowl by the door. I picked up my keys and forced a small smile. "Hey everyone. Long day at work." That was all I could say. Viva quickly turned around, putting on an exaggerated look of concern. "Oh wow. Again?" she said loudly, making sure the staff nearby could hear. "That's the 3rd job in 4 years, right?" Then she looked at Mom and added, "Remember when she lost that startup job downtown because they said she wasn't a culture fit?" Mom pressed her lips together and stayed quiet. Dad didn't even look up from his glass. My face felt warm with embarrassment. "It wasn't like that, Viva," I said calmly. "The company let go of the entire creative team. It was company-wide." She casually lifted her hand and waved her new ring in front of me. Meanwhile, Darius just closed a huge funding deal. 28 million valuation. Investors are lining up to work with him. Darius gave me the same confident smile he had when we broke up 2 years earlier, the one that came with, "It's not you, it's just bad timing." That's when Dad finally put his glass down. "Aaliyah, we need to talk," he said seriously. He didn't invite me to sit. He never did when the conversation wasn't going to be easy. He told me that the month before, he had updated the family trust. Every major asset, everything, had been transferred into Vivica's name, fully finalized, signed, filed, and legally locked in. Then he looked at me and said, "You're 32 years old. You're capable. It's time you start standing on your own." Mom added, "We can't keep supporting a lifestyle that doesn't show progress." I stood there in complete shock. My own parents, the same people who always talked about family legacy and building long-term wealth, had just removed me from everything while I stood in the middle of our living room. And Viva? She already had her phone out, recording the moment, smiling, like it was entertainment. She laughed and held her phone higher. "Look at this. Big sister shows up with nothing on Christmas Eve. Say hi to my followers." I turned toward Dad. "Are you serious right now?" For the first time that evening, he looked directly at me. His expression was calm, distant, and final. "You have 20 minutes to pack what you need," he said. "Security will allow you back tomorrow if you want the rest. You'll need to schedule it." Mom didn't even turn around. She stayed focused on adjusting a gold ornament on the Christmas tree, acting like none of this was happening. I walked upstairs in a daze. My old bedroom looked exactly the same. Swim team photos from high school still hung on the wall. Memories stared back at me from every corner. I grabbed a few basics: jeans, 2 sweaters, my laptop, and toiletries, and stuffed them into my old duffel bag. The one thing Viva hadn't taken yet. Everything else had to stay behind. My books, my yearbooks, even my framed Stanford diploma. When I came back downstairs, Viva was already live on social media, speaking dramatically. "And here she comes," she said, filming me. "One bag, no backup plan. Let's see how long before she's sleeping in that old car." Dad walked to the front door and opened it himself. The fog outside had grown thicker. I could barely see past the driveway. The cold air rushed in. I stepped forward. "Merry Christmas, Aaliyah," Viva called out sweetly. "Try not to freeze." The door closed behind me with a soft but heavy sound. The security system beeped as it activated. And just like that, it was over. In less than 30 minutes, I went from being a daughter in that house to standing outside it like a stranger. I stood on the marble steps, my suitcase beside me, wearing the only warm thing I had left: my long cashmere coat. When that door shut, everything went quiet. All I could hear was my own heartbeat. And in that moment, I realized my life had officially changed. I stood on that empty street trying to catch my breath, but the cold air burned my lungs. Dad's calm voice kept repeating in my head. One signature, $38 million gone. And Mom couldn't even look at me. I was 32 years old, and in one conversation, I had become a stranger to my own family. Standing there felt unbearable, so I started walking. The wheels of my suitcase echoed across the quiet road. It was the only sound for blocks. Every large house I passed was glowing with warm lights. I could see Christmas trees through the windows, families laughing, music playing. Each home felt like a reminder that I had nowhere to go. My fingers were already numb, but my mind wouldn't slow down. This can't be real, I kept telling myself. Any second now, Mom will open the door and call me back. She'll say it was all a misunderstanding. But nothing happened. No footsteps, no voices, no door opening. I don't know how long I walked. Maybe 20 minutes? maybe much longer, until I reached a small public garden beside an old church. There was a metal bench under a working streetlight. I dropped down onto it, let go of my suitcase, and finally allowed myself to cry. I cried for the little girl who used to sit under the Christmas tree waiting for Santa. I cried for every birthday where my sister received more, and I was told to be thankful. I cried because I truly believed that if I worked harder, achieved more, and followed every rule, I would finally be enough. But in that moment, I understood something painful. It was never about my effort, it was about comparison, and I was never the favorite. The cold air dried the tears on my face. I pulled my knees close to my chest and stared down at the ground, trying to hold myself together. That's when everything changed again. I sat there trying to figure out how I was going to make it through the night, and honestly, how I was going to make it through life. That's when I heard the slow sound of footsteps dragging across the pavement. I looked up. An elderly woman was walking toward the bench. Her silver hair was messy from the wind. Her thin shoulders were pulled inward as she tried to stay warm. Under the streetlight, her skin looked pale and fragile. She stopped a few feet away, slightly unsteady, and spoke in a weak but gentle voice. "Excuse me," she said. "Do you know if any shelters still have space tonight? I've been walking for hours. Everywhere I went was already full." I quickly wiped my face. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "I don't have anywhere to go either." She looked at me carefully for a moment, studying my face. Then she slowly sat down on the bench beside me, leaving a respectful distance between us. We sat in silence while she caught her breath. That's when I noticed her feet. They were bare, and painfully cold to the touch just by looking at them. Something inside me shifted. Here was someone who had even less than I did, yet she was still kind enough to ask instead of demand. In that moment, my own sadness felt smaller. Without saying anything, I stood up. I took off the only thing keeping me warm, my coat, and gently placed it over her shoulders. She froze for a second, surprised. Then she slowly closed her eyes as the warmth settled in. Her hands trembled as she held the fabric close to her chest. She turned toward me, her eyes filled with emotion. "What is your name, my dear?" she asked softly. "Aaliyah," I replied, my voice shaking. She repeated it quietly, like it mattered. "Thank you, Aaliyah." Then she did something I will never forget. She reached for my hands. She gently held both of my frozen hands in hers, gave one soft squeeze, and looked straight into my eyes. We didn't say anything. We didn't need to. In that quiet moment, two strangers somehow understood each other. After a long pause, she slowly stood up. Her posture seemed stronger now. She gave me a small, peaceful smile, then turned and walked away. Within seconds, she disappeared into the darkness before I even thought to call her back. I sat there alone again, colder than I had ever felt. My teeth were chattering, and my body was shaking. But something inside me had changed. For the first time since that door closed behind me, the heaviness in my chest felt lighter. Somehow, giving away the last thing I owned had given me something back. Hope. Later that night, I ended up in a small motel room. It smelled like cleaning spray and old carpet. I sat on the bed staring at job listings for hours, sending applications to anything that paid enough to survive. Then my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. "Is this Alia Vance?" a calm, professional woman asked. Her voice was confident, with a slight East Coast tone. "My name is Claudia O'Neill. I'm calling on behalf of Madame Odora St. Clair. She would like to meet with you immediately." I actually laughed. Out loud. It sounded unreal. "Is this some kind of joke?" I asked. There was a brief pause on the line. "Madame St. Clair will explain everything," she replied. A vehicle is waiting outside room 112. My heart started racing. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. Outside, the cracked parking lot was lined with identical black luxury cars, parked in a perfect row like something from a movie. The back door of the lead car slowly opened. Still wearing the same jeans and hoodie I'd had on for 2 days, I grabbed my keys and stepped outside. In the center vehicle, someone was waiting. And when I saw her face, I realized exactly who she was. It was her. The same woman from the bench. But now her hair was styled into a smooth low bun. She wore an elegant camel-colored coat tied neatly at the waist. Designer heels reflected the sunlight as she stepped forward. She looked graceful, confident, and timeless. "Alia," she said warmly, like we already knew each other. The car door closed softly. A glass partition slid up, and the vehicle pulled away. About 20 minutes later, we passed through tall gates leading to a hidden mansion tucked away on a quiet street in Atherton. Tall redwood trees and thick hedges surrounded the property. I had driven past this area countless times and never realized this place even existed. Inside, the home smelled like fresh wood and roses. A large fireplace warmed the room. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a private lake. Everything felt calm, elegant, and unreal. She motioned for me to sit on a cream-colored sofa that looked more expensive than my entire car. A staff member quietly poured tea, though neither of us touched it. She folded her hands and spoke gently. "My full name is Odora St. Clair," she said. "My late husband founded St. Clair Commercial Realty. After he passed 12 years ago, I took over the company and later shifted much of our profits into the St. Clair Family Foundation." She paused before continuing. "Our organization owns or finances hundreds of millions of square feet of commercial space across the country. Each year, the foundation distributes over $100 million to charitable programs." I sat there in silence. My mind couldn't even process the numbers. Then she leaned forward slightly. "For the past 25 years, she said, I've followed the same tradition every Christmas Eve. I leave my home dressed like someone with nothing. No visible security, no phone, no luxury items." She looked directly at me. "I walk until I find someone who still chooses kindness when they believe no one is watching. Most years, I walk all night and return home disappointed." Her voice softened. "But this year, I found you." She explained that after I walked away from the bench, her security team, dressed in regular clothing and stationed nearby, had quietly kept watch from a distance. Not to interfere, only to observe, and what they saw next changed everything. For the next 48 hours, her team quietly watched from a distance. They saw everything. They saw me check into a small motel using cash. They saw me eat simple vending machine meals. They watched me apply for more than 50 jobs in one sitting. They even saw me break down in the shower. And still, I never tried to track her down or tell anyone about what I had done. She looked at me and spoke softly. "You are the first person in 15 years who gave away the last thing keeping them warm without expecting anything in return." I needed to know if that moment was just luck, or if that's truly who you are. She stood up and walked toward the large window, resting her hands behind her back. "I don't have children," she said. "I don't have heirs. When I'm gone, strangers on a board will decide what happens to everything I've built, and I don't want that." She turned to face me. "I want someone who understands what it feels like to be left behind, especially on a night like Christmas Eve, to help decide how we support the next person who feels forgotten." Then she took a deep breath. "I'm offering you a place to stay here, a paid position, and a 5-year apprenticeship. If at the end of that time you are still the person I believe you are, the foundation will become your responsibility. Not as a reward, but as a duty." I tried to speak. My words wouldn't come out. Finally, I whispered, "Why me?" Her expression grew serious. "Because I know exactly what it feels like to sit on a cold bench with nowhere to go and still choose kindness. I was 29 when my own father turned his back on me. I promised myself that if I ever had the chance, I would make sure someone who chose the right path in that moment would never stay lost." She extended her hand toward me. "So, Alia Vance, will you come home with me?" I moved into the East Wing the following Monday. My new room was larger than the entire downstairs of my parents' house. French doors opened into a rose garden I could actually smell from my bed. And that was just the beginning, because waiting for me was Claudia O'Neill, tall, sharp, confident, holding a folder that would change my life forever. She handed me a thick leather binder and smiled slightly. "Welcome to boot camp." The first month was intense. My days started at 6 a.m. with morning runs around the lake led by Odora's former Navy fitness trainer. Breakfast followed at 7:30, where I learned how to read nonprofit tax reports faster than most professionals. From 9 to 6, I sat beside Odora in high-level foundation meetings on Sand Hill Road. I took notes while powerful investors and board members debated impact goals and funding strategy. Every evening, I reviewed years of grant records until my eyes burned. Odora made one thing very clear. She didn't want someone pretending to be generous. She wanted someone who knew how to turn money into real change, without waste. Her favorite line became, "We don't hand out quick fixes. We build systems that last." She enrolled me in Stanford's executive program for nonprofit leadership. Tuition was fully covered. No paperwork. No questions. 3 nights a week, I drove to campus, sat beside experienced executives twice my age, and learned how to measure real results instead of just good intentions. Weekends were spent in the field. I visited women's shelters in East Oakland, after-school programs in East San Jose, housing projects for veterans in the Central Valley. I sat with mothers who escaped unsafe homes with nothing but their children and a small bag of clothes. I listened to teenagers explain how having a safe place to study kept them away from dangerous paths. Every story stayed with me. Back at the estate, Claudia trained me on leadership decisions, how to manage difficult board members, how to say no to powerful requests without damaging partnerships, how to protect funding while staying ethical. And finally, how to make the hard choices that come with real responsibility. Because this wasn't charity. This was preparation. And Odora was making sure I was ready for what came next. I also had to learn how to handle serious problems, like what to do when a partner organization misused funds without turning it into a public disaster. I redesigned the entire grant application system from the ground up. Shorter forms, faster approvals, required site visits within 30 days. Odora reviewed every version and covered the pages with red notes. Then she made me stand in front of the full board and explain every single change. There were nights I fell asleep at the kitchen counter with spreadsheets open in front of me. There were mornings I cried in the shower because I felt like I didn't belong, like I was pretending to be someone important. But every time I thought about giving up, I remembered that cold bench and how it felt to have nothing. So I kept going. Then June arrived, warm and sudden. One Thursday morning, Odora sent me a short message. Library. I walked in expecting another long strategy meeting. Instead, she was standing alone near the window, sunlight pouring through the stained glass. In her hands was a single folder. She didn't sit down. She slid the folder across the wooden table and stayed standing. Inside was a formal employment agreement printed on thick cream paper. The title made my heart stop. President and Chief Executive Officer. St. Clair Family Foundation. The reporting line went directly to the board, which meant Odora herself. The salary listed was $195,000 a year. There was also a small ownership stake tied to the foundation's long-term fund, valued at just under $4 billion, and full leadership authority over all programs beginning in my 3rd year. I looked up at her, completely stunned. She finally sat down, folding her hands calmly. "I didn't bring you here just because you gave away a coat," she said softly. "Anyone can be generous for a moment. When a camera might be watching." She looked at me closely. "I watched you for 5 straight months," Odora continued. "I saw you fight for a women's shelter that several financial advisors wanted to cut because the numbers weren't perfect. I saw you sit on a simple folding chair in Oakland until midnight, listening to a 17-year-old girl explain why she couldn't go back home. I watched you rewrite a 70-page policy document because one small section would have left vulnerable youth without a safe place to sleep." Her voice softened for just a moment. "You have the mind I need, Alia," she said, "and you have the heart I lost a long time ago." She took a slow breath. "The foundation is yours to lead. I'll remain on the board to handle the old leadership culture, but the daily direction, the real work, belongs to you now." I tried to say thank you, but the words wouldn't come out. She waved her hand lightly. "Sign it before I change my mind and make you finish another finance training module first." I laughed through tears and signed the document. That evening, we sat together on the terrace as the sun dipped behind the redwood trees. We shared a quiet celebration, just the two of us, watching the sky change colors. She lifted her glass. "To the woman who had every reason to become bitter and chose kindness instead." I raised mine in return. "And to the woman who refused to let a good moment disappear unnoticed." That night marked the first time I truly felt at peace since Christmas Eve. For the first time in a long time, I felt exactly where I was meant to be. Months later, October arrived with cool air and falling leaves in San Francisco. I was sitting in my corner office on the 22nd floor of California Street, reviewing final plans for a new community project, when Claudia tapped once and stepped inside. Her expression was serious. "Alia," she said, "your sister and Darius Whitaker are downstairs. They don't have an appointment." My stomach tightened instantly, the same uneasy feeling I used to get before family confrontations rushed back. And I knew whatever came next was about to reopen everything I thought I had left behind. "Vivica used to borrow my clothes in high school and return them ruined," I said calmly. "Tell security to send them up." A few minutes later, they walked into my office like actors stepping onto a stage. Vivica wasn't wearing her usual flashy outfit. Instead, she had chosen a simple navy dress, her hair pulled back neatly, almost no jewelry. Darius had traded his casual look for a fitted suit that tried very hard to look professional. Both of them wore the same tight smiles, the kind people practice in the mirror. Vivica spoke first. Her voice was soft. Her eyes looked glossy. "Alia, I've been awful. We both have. I'm truly sorry for everything. Christmas Eve, the posts, all of it." Darius nodded quickly beside her. "We're getting married next spring. We're trying to start fresh. Do things the right way." I stayed behind my desk, hands folded, waiting. Vivica took a deep breath. "Dad is in trouble," she said quietly. "Some investments went bad. He and Mom might lose the house. And Darius's new company, the Eldercare AI project, just needs $2 million to close the first funding round. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't serious." I raised an eyebrow. "Which part is serious?" I asked calmly. "The house? Or the business valuation?" Darius forced a short laugh. "Look, I know you're doing well now, but family is family, right? $2 million is nothing to the foundation." I leaned back slightly. "Tell me what happened to the $38 million trust fund you received last December." Vivica's expression flickered for just a second. "We diversified," she said quickly. "Crypto, digital assets, startup deals through Darius's network. It was supposed to grow fast. Then the market crashed. Most of it is gone. Darius jumped in. That kind of downturn happens to everyone. Even major firms lost money. We just need a temporary bridge. I slowly opened the folder Claudia had placed on my desk earlier that morning. Then I looked up at them. And that's when I decided exactly how this conversation was going to end. Inside the folder were screenshots, bank records, and a news headline that read, "The Vance family's risky investment bet." I turned the folder toward them. 87% gone in 11 months, I said calmly. Luxury cars, deposits on vacation properties, and paid promotions to boost risky digital assets. That's not bad luck, Darius. That's reckless behavior. Vivica's expression cracked. So you're really going to sit there in your corner office and let Mom and Dad lose their home? She snapped. I pressed the button on my desk. Security to the 22nd floor, please. Darius tried a softer tone. Come on, Alia. $2 million is nothing compared to what this foundation manages. You wouldn't even feel it. I stood up slowly. This organization exists to help people who never had a safety net, I said firmly. Not people who destroyed theirs and now expect someone else to rebuild it for them. I met their eyes. You're not getting anything. Not today. Not in the future. Vivica's face turned red. She immediately pulled out her phone and started recording as security escorted them toward the door. By the time they reached the lobby, several media vans and a local blogger were already waiting outside the building. Someone had clearly alerted them. Vivica leaned into the moment, putting on a dramatic performance. Tears, shaking voice, emotional speeches about family and betrayal. Within minutes, the clip was everywhere online. The caption read, "My wealthy sister refuses to help our parents keep their home. Family should come first." The video spread fast. Millions of views in just a few hours. But then something unexpected happened. People began sharing old stories. Former classmates posted photos and messages about how Vivica treated others in school. Someone uncovered the Christmas Eve live stream where she laughed while I stood outside with my suitcase. More clips surfaced, more context appeared, and slowly, the story began to change. More stories started coming out. A former nanny shared how Vivica used to lock me outside during bad weather as a joke. Old classmates posted screenshots and messages that confirmed the pattern of behavior. The comment section completely flipped. What started as sympathy quickly turned into public criticism. The phrase, "Vance family exposed," began trending higher than the original video. Then things unraveled even faster. Darius's investor presentation somehow made its way to reporters. It didn't take long for people to realize the so-called elder care tech company was mostly empty promises, built on unfinished work from a small personal project. Potential investors pulled out almost overnight. Vivica's wedding planner canceled the booking after discovering unpaid deposits. Her engagement post was flooded with negative comments and quickly lost all traction. Through all of this, I stayed silent. I didn't post. I didn't respond. I didn't defend myself. By midnight, the original viral video was restricted for harassment. The blogger who first pushed the story issued a public apology. Vivica's follower count dropped dramatically. When I returned to Atherton that night, Claudia poured me a small glass of whiskey and handed it to me with a quiet smile. "Sometimes the best outcome happens when you don't have to say a word," she said. I raised the glass toward the dark window. "It feels like closure," I replied. November arrived with heavy fog that seemed to hang over the city. Then the next headline hit. On a Tuesday morning, news broke that Pacific Crest Capital had collapsed. Investigators revealed it was a massive financial fraud operation involving billions of dollars. Dad had moved what remained of their money into that fund months earlier. He believed the promised high returns would help them recover. Even refinancing the house and selling valuables hadn't been enough to save it. Authorities raided the company's offices that same week. The founder had already left the country. 30 days later, a foreclosure notice appeared on the front door of the Hillsborough mansion. No buyers showed up at the auction. The bank took ownership. And just like that, the lifestyle my parents had protected for years was gone. My parents and Vivica ended up moving into a small 2-bedroom apartment above a nail salon in East San Jose. The rent was $1,900 a month, the most they could manage. After filing for bankruptcy, Vivica's credit cards were maxed out at nearly $250,000, mostly from luxury shopping and impulse spending. After everything collapsed in October, collection agencies started calling nonstop. One rainy Thursday morning, all 3 of them showed up at the foundation without an appointment. Security called my office. I told them to let them in. Dad looked like he had aged 20 years overnight. His hair was completely white. His jacket hung loosely on his frame. Mom had cut her hair short and dyed it a dull brown that didn't quite suit her. Vivica wore no makeup. Her eyes were swollen and she clutched a worn purse tightly in her hands. I met them in a small glass conference room on the 22nd floor. No drinks, no small talk. Claudia stood quietly outside the door. Dad spoke first. His voice shook. "Aaliyah, you're my daughter. I know we hurt you. I know we don't deserve help. But we don't have anywhere else to go. Our lease ends in 6 weeks. We're about to lose everything." Mom kept her eyes on the table, twisting a tissue between her fingers. Vivica finally looked up, her eyes red. "Please," she said softly. "Just enough to start over. We'll sign anything. We won't ask again." I opened a thin black folder and placed 3 business cards on the table. The first was for Marcus Chen, a certified financial planner who specializes in rebuilding after bankruptcy. The second was for a debt recovery and financial education program, an 8-week course fully funded by the foundation and held at the East San Jose Community Center. Then I reached for the third card. And this one changed the entire room. The third card was for the California Crisis Line through NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, along with a local therapist who offered sliding scale fees. I slid the cards across the table. "This is what the St. Clair Foundation provides to people who've lost everything through no fault of their own," I said calmly. "It's the same support we offer anyone who walks through our doors scared, overwhelmed, and starting from zero." Dad's hand trembled as he reached for the cards, then stopped midair. "That's it?" he asked quietly. "After 32 years, this is all you have for your own father?" I stood up. "You had choices, Langston," I said. "You chose to rewrite the trust. You chose to chase impossible returns. You chose to stay silent when Vivica treated me like a joke. Those were your decisions, not mine." Mom finally lifted her head. Tears streamed down her cheeks. "We were wrong," she whispered. "We're so sorry." I met her eyes for the first time in almost 2 years. "I believe you're sorry now," I said softly. "But apologies don't rebuild lives. Effort does, accountability does, and courage does." Vivica broke down completely, sobbing without control. "You're enjoying this," she cried. "You want us to suffer." I walked to the door and held it open. "No," I said. "I just stopped paying the price for your mistakes." Security escorted them out. Dad never turned back. Mom whispered, "I'm sorry," one last time before the elevator doors closed. Vivica's crying echoed down the hallway until they disappeared. Claudia handed me a tissue I didn't realize I needed. "They'll be okay," she said gently. "People who hit rock bottom either stay there or they finally start climbing. You gave them the only ladder you were meant to give." I nodded, watching the rain slide down the windows. For the first time in years, the weight in my chest was gone. Not because I won, but because I finally chose myself. It wasn't replaced by happiness. It was replaced by space. Space to breathe. Space to move forward. The sky over East Palo Alto looked gray and strong on opening day. The second housing campus stood tall, a promise finally kept. 4 floors of glass and redwood surrounded a sunny courtyard where children were already running between planters filled with herbs and vegetables. More than 3,000 people filled the plaza. Families who would soon live there. Supporters. City leaders. News crews. Even the governor was there to cut the ribbon. Backstage, I stood in a simple black suit, my heartbeat louder than the music warming up outside. Claudia gave my hand a quick squeeze. Odora, dressed in bright white, met my eyes from the front row and gave a quiet nod. This project was personal. I had poured everything into it. 200 permanent homes, an on-site medical clinic, job training programs, a preschool, a rooftop garden, and one clear rule: no family would ever be turned away because of missing paperwork. The mayor finished speaking. The crowd cheered as my name was announced. I stepped up to the podium. The microphone felt heavier than any contract I had ever signed. I looked out at the crowd. Near the back, almost hidden behind a pillar, I saw them. Langston, Oilia, Vivica. Dad's old navy coat hung loosely on his frame. Mom held a paper coffee cup like it was the only warm thing she had. Vivica had cut her hair short and looked smaller without her usual designer armor. I paused for 3 full seconds. Then I spoke. 1 year ago tonight, I said, steady and clear. I walked out of the only home I had ever known with 1 suitcase and nowhere to go. That night taught me what it feels like when the people who were supposed to protect you don't. They're supposed to catch you, not drop you. A quiet ripple moved through the crowd. Cameras zoomed in. But that night on a frozen park bench taught me something else too. Real family isn't about blood. Real family is the stranger who notices you when the world walks past. It's the hand that reaches for you when you have nothing left to offer. I turned and pointed to the building behind me. This is Second Home, I said. 200 families will never again sleep in cars because rent suddenly doubled. Children will never again do homework in the back seat because the electricity was shut off. Then I paused. And every person who walks through these doors will hear the words I needed to hear on Christmas Eve. You are not disposable. You are not alone. You belong here. The applause started slowly, then exploded. People stood up. Phones rose into the air like a wave of light. I waited until the noise settled, then spoke again, softer this time, so every microphone had to lean in. Tonight, we open these doors for everyone who has ever been told they don't matter, especially those who heard it from the people who were supposed to love them most. My eyes locked on 3 figures near the back. Dad's shoulders trembled. Mom covered her mouth. Vivica stared at the ground. I didn't smile. I didn't look angry. I simply held their gaze for 1 quiet heartbeat longer than comfort allows. Then I stepped away from the podium. The ribbon was cut. Music filled the plaza. Children rushed forward carrying flowers. Reporters shouted questions I chose not to hear. I walked down the steps as the crowd parted around me like water, heading toward the main entrance. Behind me, I heard a familiar voice. Aaliyah. I kept walking. Not fast, not slow, just forward. Mom reached out, but her hand never touched me. Vivica opened her mouth, then closed it again. For the first time in her life, she had nothing to say. I passed within 2 feet of them without turning my head. The tall redwood doors of Second Home slid open as I approached. Warm light spilled onto the pavement like an invitation. I stepped inside. Behind me, the doors closed with a soft, final sound. I didn't look back. Not because I was angry. Not because I needed revenge. But because I finally understood something important. Forgiveness doesn't always mean reopening the door that hurt you. Sometimes it means choosing a new one and letting the old one stay closed. Inside, a small boy wearing a Spider-Man jacket tugged gently on my sleeve. "Are you the lady who built this place?" he asked. I knelt down so we were eye to eye. "I'm one of the people who helped," I said. He held out a dandelion he'd picked from the courtyard. "For you," he said. "Why did you give us a home?" I took the flower, and for the first time in a long while, I smiled. A real smile. Outside, the celebration continued. Inside second home, the future quietly began. If this story touched you, let me know in the comments. Tell me which city you're listening from. I love hearing from you. And if you'd like to support this channel so I can keep bringing you more true-to-life stories like this, you can send a super thanks. Don't forget to subscribe. More powerful life stories are waiting for you on the screen. Until next time. With love and respect.